So overall, I do really enjoy Black Ops 4 Zombies. They made a lot of changes to this game, some of which I think were really good, some I don't think were as good, and there are some things from previous games that they just did not implement as well as before. So today I wanted to talk about some of the things that I personally would change that I think would improve the overall game. To start off, I would like to talk about the first thing that you have to worry about in every match of zombies. Your class. In all the previous games, you only ever started with whatever you needed to get through these first couple rounds. You had a very weak pistol with not very much ammo, grenades that weren't all too powerful, a knife, 500 points, and pretty low health. Now, in Black Ops 4, the Welling, which is supposed to be the weakest of the pistols, is still pretty good. However, there are other weapons that you can choose to start with that are better and are usable in the later rounds. But if it wasn't enough that you can start the game with a more powerful weapon than ever before, they all will give you the same amount of points no matter what. And because they're all available on the wall anyway, I don't really see a reason to pick one weapon over the other, but ultimately, any choice you make will still be more efficient than any previous weapon we've had in a previous game. Also now in Black Ops 4, we have the ability to pick which piece of equipment we start with. I think this would have been a pretty decent change if they had just stuck to frag grenades, claymores, and sentry guns, and left acid bombs as a viable thing on the wall like Semtex were before. But instead, we are given 5 options, 3 of which are very similar, and they are all much more powerful than they should be. In fact, these grenades are so powerful that you have to go farther into the game than you did before to even make a crawler with them. The amount of health you get, on the normal difficulty at least, is comparable to what Juggernog used to give you in previous games. And because there's no way to increase your health throughout the game like before, the amount of health you start with just doesn't feel right. And those 500 points you get? Well, in previous games you would used to have to choose between buying a weapon, a quick revive, a door on some maps, or you could save those points. Now, the revives are given to you by default, so you don't have to spend them on that. You can spawn with any weapon you want for free. So really, there's only 2 choices that you can make with your points, either buy a door or save them. Speaking of the self-revives, I'm not 100% sure how I feel about this new system. What I liked about the old quick revive system is that even though it was a very important perk and almost everyone would buy it, you could sacrifice a self-revive for another ability. Now you are forced into having the self-revives, and you can have all your other perks as well. I think it would have been better if there was some kind of self-revive station in the spawn room of every map, and you could purchase a self-revive for 500 points like in previous games. With something like this, you wouldn't need a perk to get your self-revive, but it also wouldn't just be given to you by default. You're also given your own choice of a specialist weapon at the beginning of every match. It's not available right away, but it will be pretty soon. I think that they are just too powerful for the beginning of the game. They have infinite damage, give you even more health, and can get you out of a spot that would have otherwise killed you. Maybe it would have been better if they were put in the mystery box like any other wonder weapon. Or perhaps it could have been made so that they're only available after picking up a full power power-up, similarly to how the death machine used to work. When it comes to the perks, I don't have an issue with this new system. However, I feel like 4 is not enough to put on each map. There's an element of randomness to every match of zombies, and not every perk is able to account for all these different ways of playing. For example, if you have Deadshot Dealer and end up with a ray gun in Winter's Howl Unclassified, that perk is pretty much useless other than to activate your modifier. I think, to solve this, it would help to add 2 more perks to each class. They could just be standard perk machines just like all the other ones, but I was thinking it'd be a bit more interesting if they introduced them as something that I like to call broken perks. These perks would act like the opposite of a modifier. They would not give you the complete ability of each perk until you have 4. On the Aether maps, these could be really old, worn down perk machines with names like Poison or Toxin. And on the Chaos maps, they could be statues of mythological characters that were sent to some kind of eternal punishment by the gods, of which there are many in Greek mythology alone. Additionally, I would also like it if every perk had its own unique jingle that played every time you bought it, rather than the generic Wonderfizz jingle that you hear every time already. And that's everything I wanted to talk about from the class system. Now I'm going to get into other game mechanics. Firstly, the mystery box, which I think spawns too close to the first room on almost every map. It's better on some maps than others, but for the most part you only have to open 2 or 3 doors to even get to it. I think this messes up the progression of the game by letting people have access to much more powerful weapons at the start of the game, rather than have to work their way through the map in order to get to them, and have to work with wall weapons until then. I think this would be a really simple fix. Either change the spawn locations of the box to be farther away from the spawn room, or just let the mystery box spawn anywhere on the map, both close and far away. And on the topic of the mystery box and weapons, I feel like the weapons in this game were not balanced very well. Overall, it feels like almost every weapon is viable, and that there aren't very many bad weapons, especially on the walls. Of course, there are exceptions. Things like the escargot, Essex, Sog, and Augur don't feel like very viable weapons to me that I'd want to take into the late rounds. But then there are things like the Vapor, ICR, Kashka, and Mog 12, which just feel way too powerful for a wall weapon. It feels like a lot of the DLC weapons they've been adding into the game are weaker than the rest of them, which I think is good because there needs to be a balance between powerful and weak weapons. However, they're all in the box, which means that the wall weapons are still going to be just as powerful. I also went and looked through the magazine capacities for assault rifles and submachine guns in both Black Ops 4 and Black Ops 1. What I found is that in Black Ops 4, for the on-disc assault rifles, the average rounds per magazine is 34. And the smallest magazine in a single weapon is 30 rounds. For the on-disc submachine guns in Black Ops 4, the average rounds per magazine is 39, and the smallest magazine you'll find in submachine guns is 30. In Black Ops 1, the average assault rifle magazine capacity was 32, and the minimum magazine size was 20. Submachine guns had an average of 26 rounds, and a minimum magazine size of 20 as well. Overall, the weapons in Black Ops 4 just have more ammo in them than they did in Black Ops 1, which of course makes them better than before. I think to fix this weapon balancing issue, they should either adjust the damage for the weapons, or the ammo capacities, or both. After all, they did used to change the magazine sizes in Black Ops 1 for the Zombies mode. Still on the topic of weapons, I think it's a little overpowered to be able to have all your attachments on a weapon the moment you buy it. This is something that I've had an issue with since Black Ops 3, and I always thought it would have been better if you got those weapons attachments after you put it into the Pack-a-Punch, just like it worked in the previous games. However, if they don't want to do this, I think it would be okay if they just adjusted the prices of weapons based on the attachments you put on them. Also on the topic of Pack-a-Punching, I feel like they could have done a lot more with the Pack-a-Punch camos. I feel like it would have been cool if the Pack-a-Punch camo was kind of like a reactive camo that would change as you upgraded it more and more so that you could visually see what version of your weapon you're on. I also would have liked it if on the remake maps like Classified and Blood of the Dead, they would have used the original Pack-a-Punch camos, and then expanded on those like a reactive camo. Instead, there's just one form of every Pack-a-Punch camo on each map, and you only get a random color change when you repack. Also, on the topic of repacking, I think it would make more sense if you had to maximize your weapon's damage before you got an alternate ammo type. With how powerful they can be, I feel like it would be more balanced this way. Something else I have an issue with in this game is the overall pace of every match. I'm not 100% sure why, but a match of zombies in this game seems to go by faster than in a previous game. I'm not sure if it has to do with specialist weapons or the speed of the zombies, but overall the rounds seem to go by much faster than before. But this really isn't an issue, it's more of a subjective thing. Some people might like the game more fast-paced. I personally prefer zombies to be a bit more slow and methodical, but like I said, completely subjective. However, in the two games that I'm comparing, there really isn't much of a difference. The early rounds aren't meant to take that long anyway, but I could also just be completely crazy and there's no difference whatsoever. It's something that's probably worth testing more. And finally, the last thing that I could think of that I'd want to change in this game is the hit markers. I would really appreciate it if we could turn off the hit markers. I just don't feel like they belong in a PvE mode. They don't really hurt anything, but they are kinda ugly, especially in this game. And then that's it. Those are the changes that I could think of that I think would make Black Ops 4 a better game. However, I think I understand why they made these changes that I'm not too fond of. I think it's because they want to put an emphasis on the quest part of zombies, as well as the survival part. That's why we're given specialist weapons and a very close mystery box, default self-revives in solo, and the whole create a class system. They want it to be easier to do these quests. However, I think by trying to implement co-op story mode things into zombies, it hurts the survival aspect of the game. So ultimately what I think they should do is either add another mode or another difficulty that includes changes like this. That way they would have both a survival mode and a story mode, and be able to get the best of both worlds.